marker. I have pink. I don't know how weird it is.
Are we having marker problems again? Hello, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Okay.
Hello, Warren.
See.
I haven't seen you since November.
That's not, well, that's right, because you guys went on
We were
vacation.
gone.
How was it?
It was great,
Great.
unless you go to the Embera tribe, and then you come back and it's raining, so I'm sitting in the canoe in the rain.
Where did you go?
We went here to Florida and Florida back and Panama Canal. It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Well, we went once before, but halfway, we turned around in Lake Botany and came back. This time we went all the way through.
Why did you turn around?
This is round trip, LA to LA.
Oh.
But this time we went to Florida and came back.
Got it.
Hi, Susie. Hi. It's Carousel.
What is Curacao? Yes.
They say it's Florida, now they do have an Austin
They do now?
They do now.
I know Vermont is there, so
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure they
Canada.
have. No, but in Curacao also,
But
they
it's-
must, yeah. When we did Curacao here, one of the ladies had a, remember that? No, her nephew was the rabbi there, and we put in a call to him during class,
Yeah.
and he talked to us about the synagogue in Curacao.
I think it's a river. Carousel now has this Ashkenazic synagogue.
Oh, wow.
And you wonder why is all the Spanish left
Uh-huh.
and the Dutch came in?
Welcome home.
Hey.
Welcome home.
How are
Glad
you?
to see you. I have a million questions.
Oh, my gosh.
Panama.
Beautiful. Very nice.
I know it's a really nice trip.
Ken, how you feeling?
Oh, good.
So you didn't go on safari?
I did not go on safari. You know, I have a, it's, what's the word? I'm very, very sensitive to watching other animals kill other animals, which could happen.
Yeah, it didn't while I was there, but you're right, it could.
And I would just, it would absolutely ruin my trip. It would devastate me.
No, the only thing that we actually saw was a cheetah with its kill, but it was already dead. But other than that, no, no, generally we're around when they're either done or whatever.
Yeah, but if I were to see that, I would just be devastated. So I couldn't do it. But we had lots of other stuff to see, so.
I saw that.
Yeah,
Okay, good,
yeah. We're gonna talk about it today a little bit.
wonderful.
When were you there?
About 4 years ago.
Oh. Very nice.
So we did a world cruise and we got off at Port Elizabeth and flew and actually drove to where there was a safari place.
Mhm.
And we stayed there for a week. We flew to Cape Town, picked up our ship again and continued on.
Oh, I enjoyed Cape Town. Well, we stayed in a very, very nice area.
Yeah.
So,
Did you go up on top of the mountain?
Table Mountain, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a view up there.
Oh, it was fantastic, yeah. Did they have, did they have this one yet when you were there?
No.
That's the brand new one and it's spectacular.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I had a pretty good time.
Yeah. Tracy, any luck with the marker? Yeah, this is, I don't know. Oh, it'll work, I guess. Yeah, I don't have a lot to, yeah, it'll work.
Welcome back to Adada Real.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
And welcome to the world of Trump insanity. Huh?
It's beyond, it's beyond.
Should have done a blue one.
But you know what? See, I said to my buddy the other day, he's a really bright guy, really bright guy. He knows almost everything about anything, including science and math. And we sat down and talked at our house. And what amazes me is that in these last there was a lot of anger and protesting. That the people were just worn out, like, you know, but you haven't heard much.
Well, think about it, who was protesting last night? The Rangers was protesting. They won because he lost.
Yeah, I'm talking about when Trump was in person.
Oh, yeah, I think people are just exhausted and they understand that there's very little to decide.
Except through the courts.
Yeah, there's not much we can decide.
Except for the courts.
I don't think they're gonna stop them ever. I mean, he won't get birth rates in this country. I love it. They, birth rates in this country. But I think he'll get a lot. He's gonna get a lot.
I said to my wife, and I believe that, welcome to the world of Trump insanity.
Yes, it's true. It's very true.
But I'm glad, you had a good trip to South Africa?
I did.
That, you know what? That night over dinner, I said to her, I hope he talks about South Africa.
Oh, good.
I really did.
Good. Good. Yes, yeah. Hello, Lana.
Hi, Ernie.
lot.
Right, I've been doing all the plus medical stuff. My discharge is starting to get back to normal.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm happy. The biggest thing was getting back and sleeping in my own bed. That was the biggest hardship.
Amazing, the little things that.
Just want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. I mean, the place I was in was fine, but that wasn't my bed. But compared to what some people are going through right now, it's minor.
Susie, can we get started? Okay, good morning, everyone. So, as you know, or may know, I was on vacation last week. I was in South Africa, Cape Town, and so I want to tell you a little bit about Cape Town in general, my trip, and then we'll go through Jews of South Africa. So for those of you who don't know, Cape Town is located at just about this, it's not, but just about the southernmost point in Africa. And it was established very early on because Portuguese explorers were looking for a way to get to India. Why did they want to get to India? Because India had spices, nutmeg, cinnamon, black pepper, and in those days, spices were worth almost as much as gold. So everyone was looking for a sea route to India. The problem that everybody faced, all of the explorers faced, and there are two big ones that we're going to talk about in a second, was that right to the a little bit farther south and to the east of Cape Town is where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean meet. And the Indian Ocean has very warm currents, and they're strong currents. The Atlantic Ocean is much colder, and the currents aren't as strong. And I don't know why this happens meteorologically, but when those two things meet down here, it produces huge storms. Storms. And so this area down here was known as the Cape of Storms because there were many, many shipwrecks. Nobody could, get around down here to get to India. King John II of Portugal renamed it the Cape of Good Hope because the sailors were afraid. They didn't want to go on a ship that was going to the Cape of Storms. So they figured, well, the Cape of Good Hope, wow, that's a great place to go. Let's go there. And so they renamed it the Cape of Good Hope. And our tour guide was nice enough. We took a nice little tour right at the Cape of Good Hope and with the signs. You guys did that too? How many of you have been to South Africa? Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So the two biggest cities, really, Johannesburg and Cape Town. Pretoria is the capital. Huh? Or Joburg. Yeah. Or we're going to find out in a minute, earlier on it was Jewburg. Yes. People called it Jewburg because it had the largest Jewish population way, way, way back. So it was very nice. We took a private tour all the way around. And it's on a road that was very curvy, very windy, and it was hewn out of the stones way, 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 way back, so that people could get from one side to the other side. And so it was very nice. It was lovely. So I flew in and arrived on Sunday, last Sunday. It was 11 hours to London. We had a 3-hour stopover and then 10 hours to Cape Town. This is the last time I'm doing that. I'm not doing it again. It's just too much. It's too much. I can't be on a plane for 21 hours again. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad I did it, but now I'm done. 11 hours to London. Then we had a short layover, 3 hours, and then 10 hours to Cape Town. You could, yeah. Yeah. And as Ken and I were discussing earlier, I flew into Heathrow, which is a big mess. Never again am I going to Heathrow. It's just a horrible airport. So I arrived on Sunday, and on Monday was just nothing. Tuesday was a little bit of exploring. Wednesday, I got married. Wednesday night, I got married. Thank you. On the beach at sunset. It was in Cape Town, and it was quite beautiful, quite beautiful. And then,
The purpose of your visit.
yes, there definitely was. And Thursday, we took a big tour. That was our big tour. Our favorite stop along that tour was a place called Simonstown. And in Simonstown, they have the African penguins. And you saw the African penguins? That was my favorite stop. They were so cute. They're little penguins. They're not the emperor penguins that you're going to see in Antarctica. These are little penguins. And they're all over, and they're just so cute. They're great. So I loved that. And then we went on the top of what's called Table Mountain. It's a huge mountain there. And the views were incredible. You take a tram all the way up to the top, and the views are unbelievable. We didn't have a chance to go to the Botanical Gardens. I really wanted to, but you can't. But on Saturday, we went to Robben Island. And Robben Island is very interesting because this is where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for the first 18 years of his imprisonment. And it was a little bit of an emotional tour, actually. I haven't been to any of the concentration camps, but in a teeny little way, it kind of reminded me of what that might look like. Big barbed wire fences everywhere, sterile buildings. I mean, it was, and the prisoners were housed, depending on what kind of prisoner you were, and what level prisoner you were. Some were housed 50 in a room, some had beds, some didn't have beds, and then we walked by and saw Nelson Mandela's cell. And that was pretty, it was just a good, very significant, yes, very moving day for us. And then we flew home. So, 9 days, not 8 or 9 days, yeah. Ken asked me that. I didn't go on safari purposely. I have a real thing about watching an animal kill another animal. I can't do it. And I knew that if by chance that I saw that. I mean, it could happen. It probably doesn't, but it could happen. If I saw that, I would just be devastated. The trip would be ruined, and I didn't want to take that chance. But there were so many other things to see. It was very interesting. Now, we stayed in a beautiful area of Cape Town called the Waterfront. And the Waterfront reminds me a lot of Marina del Rey. It is a harbor with lots of boats. It's very upscale, beautiful upscale, huge modern mall, many, many beautiful upscale restaurants all over. So there was no, kitchen in the hotel, so we went out to eat for every meal. And I gained 5 pounds, which is no good, but it's okay. But, all kinds of fish everywhere, and it was just...
So you were not on a tour,
No.
you went on your own?
I went on my own. One thing that surprised me a lot. So Cape Town has some beautiful areas, and some not so beautiful areas. Yes, a real bad slum of a lot of people. Obviously, as I just said, we stayed in a really, really, really beautiful area. But what surprised me most, I think, is that certainly in the area that we were, 100% of the workers in the restaurant were black. 100% of the people who were sitting in the restaurant eating were white. Now, there is no forced separation anymore, but unemployment for the youth in Cape Town is 67%. And so there are still, there's still some kind of feelings of something, because it was just very odd to me. Maybe we equate it a little bit to like here in Los Angeles, often in a restaurant, a lot of the staff will be Hispanic. It's just the way it is. And that didn't I didn't even think about that until I was in Cape Town, and every single person working in the restaurant was black. Every single person. I didn't see any white waiters, nothing. And every single patron of the restaurant was white. It's an international place where I was. It was great. We walked down, and out of your right ear, you hear a couple speaking German. Out of your left ear, it was French, and then Indian, and it was really fun. Our tour guide on that big tour was from the Congo originally. He was born in Congo, and their first language is French. I hadn't spoken French in a while, but it was great because I just fell right into it, and I was off, and we had a lot of fun. He goes, "Well, how do you know to speak French so well?" And I took it in high school, and then I went to Europe, and blah 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 blah.
Your comments about the separation in the restaurant reminded me of something I had heard about South Africa. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot. Okay. Your comments about the situation in the restaurant you went to, with the division between the blacks and the whites, and who was the servers and who were the customers, reminded me of something I had heard about South Africa a long time ago, which was that, oh, you can't hear me still? Was that, and this is in the wealthy, affluent areas, that a lot of people have armed guards around their homes. They hire private security services. So this is a lot, so I guess there's a lot of additional problems between the races in that way as well.
Not only armed guards, they have electrified fences so that people can't climb over, they get electrocuted. It's a very how can I call it? It's a very secured area, and we went to, what is it, Johannesburg, and that was even worse. Because you have a lot of immigrants coming over, you know, looking for work, et cetera, and whenever you have a large number of people, you're going to have some crime, and so that's what people are afraid of.
And one thing that really stuck out for me is that everything is so cheap there. You can't imagine. We would sit down, and I had a beautiful dinner of fresh sole with lemon and capers, and you know, we had these beautiful dinners and wine and everything. The check, $40.
For the two of you?
Yeah, and I'm like, what? And it was like that for everything. It was unbelievable. I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. This is good. And then on the tour, we went by this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful area. It reminds me of Malibu. It's called Camps Bay. And Camps Bay, the guy said, oh, these houses, there's like millions and millions of rand. That's the South African currency, rand. And I said, well, how much exactly? It worked out to like 500,000 in our dollars. And I'm like, you can't even get a single-family house in Los Angeles for $500,000. And I could buy the house there, sitting up on the hill, overlooking the beautiful, unbelievable. You can't get a condo. Yeah. Well, you know what? I would think about it. But then the next town over from Camps Bay was called Kulks Bay, Kulks, Kulks Bay. And apparently during apartheid, that was a very, very, very ritzy place, obviously whites only. And even today, if you're black, you can't buy anything in Kulks Bay. So, Cecil.
I had a comment on your previous remark about the help that you found in the restaurant. I'm sorry. The help that you found in the restaurant being all black. Well, one of the big draws about working in a restaurant is that you can eat there. And those who have troubles finding enough cash to eat do gravitate to restaurants. I know. I went through it. I wanted to be a busboy.
I did find that wherever we went, especially in the restaurants, everyone was extraordinarily friendly. The young people were, and they couldn't have been making that much money because the standard tip in South Africa is 10%, not 15 or 20%. That's a lot. And I mean, I'm used to leaving. I try to actually 20% of work here wherever I go because I know how difficult it is to be a waiter. I was a waiter for many years. And I remember times when it was like, okay, I have my shift tonight, I've got to make $40 to make rent tomorrow. I know how difficult it is, so I only do 20%. So I went 15%, and they went, wow, thank you so much. And I'm thinking, you know, this is not that big a deal. To them, it was a huge deal, and they were all very friendly and very nice. Yes. Yes. Whoa.
Okay. So we went to South Africa, and we went to Joburg, and my son-in-law, who lives in Canada, is from South Africa, and we had two interesting things that happened. One is his family lived in a home that was an architectural wonder, and one like First Place, whatever, Architectural Digest, whatever they have there. And the house, when they moved to Canada, the house became a restaurant. So the Uncle Mike took us to the restaurant, not to eat, but to see the home that my son-in-law lived in. And he'd go room by room and go, well, this is where your son-in-law, it was his bedroom. This was this room. I mean, and this is a restaurant now. Okay, that was one funny thing. The other thing was he was extremely, this is a man who was very successful in garment business, and he was extremely challenged technologically. So he wanted to show us his house, but the house is locked up. And you know, everything's locked up there. And he couldn't show it to us because he doesn't know how to do the code and whatever to get in and out of the house. And he also was driving a Jaguar. And I'm sitting in the back, and my Mike is in the front with him. And I said, gee, it's really warm back here, Mike. Could you please, do you have any air conditioning? He says, sure. And he turns down the windows. Because he can't work his air conditioning in his car that is not brand new. Okay? All right. So do you want to see the grandkids and his wife? Sure we do. So we go to where his kids live. They're not home. The wife is babysitting. And you get to the place, and there's a guard, and they let you into the area. Fine. Then we get to the street, and we go up the driveway, and there's a gate. And he calls her, and she lets him in the gate. We get in the gate, we get in the house, and she says, do you want to see the kids? They're upstairs. Sure we do. We get halfway up the stairs, and there's a gate. Can't even get up the stairs to see the kids without her taking care of the gate. And that's how we got to, so that's the kind of security that they live with daily.
Yeah, Oh, yes, Gloria.
I've been reading that there's a lot of anti-Semitism since 10/7. Can you hear me? I'm talking pretty loud.
I've been reading, so hang on everyone, relax. Gloria asked, I've been reading that there's been a great uptick in anti-Semitism since 10/7 in South Africa. And so I asked our guide, and he said he was not aware of a huge rise in anti-Semitism except during protests. There have been protests, and but it hasn't been a terrible situation, he said. I'll tell you one final thing, and we'll get going on Jews of South Africa. We passed by on the tour a community. Not so upscale, a community. It was called Ocean View. And the tour guide said, you may ask why it's named Ocean View when there is no ocean and there is no view. And he said it was because during apartheid, these were blacks who were thrown out of their homes, and they were given this community. And they named the community Ocean View because it reminded them of their original home, which was on the ocean, in the hopes that they would get back to their original homes. One final thing. People are classified there as white, black, and colored. And I remember when the tour guide was telling us, he said, and the colored people are, and I was like, I was like, we don't say that. No. He said, I know. But here it's very, very, very normal. What it means to them, coloreds, are mixed race people. Mixed race. Blacks, obviously, whites, obviously, and mixed race. A lot of Indonesians, and they are referred to as coloreds, which was
In fact, that's the first time I think in my life I've ever said that out loud. I've never said that word out loud.
They use the term Negroes.
No, I didn't hear that once.
So, Rabbi, are the Indians considered colored?
No, the Indians were not considered colored.
There's a large Indian population in Dunedin.
Uh-huh.
That's where Gandhi lived.
Yeah. Gary said there's a large Indian population in one of the cities. Yeah, okay. All right. So, how did Jews get to South Africa? Let's get into our material today.
My guess was 1492. My guess is 1492 that the expulsion and they had to go someplace. I don't know. That's a guess.
Good guess, but not true. Survey says, no. They came over, the original Jews came over as explorers, cartographers, map makers, astronomers, and they were employed by the Portuguese monarchy. And they came over originally in 2 years. The first year was 1488 with Bartholomew Diaz. And Bartholomew Diaz was a Portuguese explorer looking to make his way around and find a sea route to India.
Yeah.
Okay. The second group came...
Where was he from?
Portugal.
Oh, he was from Portugal.
And the second group came with Vasco da Gama in 1497. And again, both of them were trying to find that route to India. Vasco da Gama ultimately made it around the Cape of Good Hope, and he did get to India. So he's very celebrated in South Africa, at least in Cape Town, I will say. In Cape Town, we went by Vasco da Gama Drive, Vasco da Gama Square. I mean, there were a number of places that were named after him. In 1652, the Dutch East India Company creates a settlement at the Cape of Good Hope. So what happened was Cape Town was a, what's the word, like a resting place, resupplying place. Yeah, kind of, halfway stop. Place to resupply, get more water and food, etc. And so people started settling there, little by little by little by little. And there were some Jews in the settlement, but they were non-practicing Jews. It was a small settlement, and the reason why they were non-practicing Jews is because the Dutch East India Company required all of their employees to be Protestant. So, who were the people who were coming over? The employees of the Dutch East India Company. They were on the, all of these people who were on these trips to find India were employees of the Dutch East India Company. And you had to be a Protestant. And the non-practicing Jews, I guess, kind of like, well, we'll let them go, because they're not practicing Judaism. You have to ask this way, or Susie's going to get me.
Sorry, yeah. Is the Dutch East India Company related to the British East India Company?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Yes, Cecil.
Just a comment on something that we discussed a few minutes ago. One of the reasons, if not the biggest reasons, that Colón convinced the rulers of Spain is that he was going to find a short way to get to India. And that's how they founded, of course, a lot of Jewish Marranos founded Colón because they wanted to get the hell out of Spain. So he had funding from both the crown and the Jewish community.
Thank you. So, in 1803, Dutch authorities granted religious freedom to all inhabitants and immigrants of Cape Town. In 1805, the British came through and took over the colony and occupied it. And so then by 1820, the Jews start to arrive. And the first congregation was called Gardens Shul in Cape Town in 1841. And, wherever we go, we start businesses and we excel. And so by 1856, James Mosenthal had become the major producer of wool, and he had imported 30 Angora goats from Asia, and so he became a sort of mogul in the wool business, especially mohair. In 1849 to 1886, Aaron and David DePass became the largest ship owners in Cape Town, and they were leaders of the seal, capturing seals and slaughtering seals, whaling and fishing industries. And Jews were involved in ostrich farming as well. When we went on our tour, we passed by an ostrich farm, and there were like 6 or 7 wild ostriches in the field that we went by. That was interesting.
Are they wild when they're on a farm? No.
Well, but that's a good point. So they're on the farm, so they're not wild, but there were wild ostriches. Okay. Because on other parts of the tour, he said, if you look out your left, this is where all the wild ostriches are, and this is where all the something like they were something like antelopes or something sort of like that. Meat.
Yeah, meat.
Ostrich meat.
What about their eggs that are this big?
Yeah, and the eggs, he said, 1 ostrich egg equals 20 chicken eggs.
My gosh.
Huge.
All we need is 2 eggs.
Huge. And to a lesser degree, Jews began to participate in politics. They were excluded from the highest echelon of politics, but in the secondary places, secondary political roles, they were starting to become accepted. In 1886, there was a South African gold rush, and it attracted lots of Jews who wanted to get rich on gold. At that time, in 1886, there were about 4,000 Jews. By 1914, 40,000. So you had 1886, right? Plus 14 years is 1900, plus 4. So in 28 years, 40,000 Jews. And they came from Lithuania. And it's at this time that there were so many Jews that had settled in Johannesburg that some people called it Jewburg. What you hear now is Joburg.
Joburg.
Yeah. So in Joburg, they have this instead of Johannesburg, it's Joburg. In 1906, Yiddish was classified as a European language, not as a Semitic language. Why? Because Jews were being stopped when people heard them speaking Yiddish. But Jews were classified as whites. Under the white-black colored system, Jews were whites, so Jews had privileges. In 1930, there was the Quota Act. And the Quota Act was designed to curtail immigration of Jews into South Africa from Lithuania. So remember, if you think about our history, 1930, that's just 6 years after 1924, the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act here in America, and 9 years before Britain is going to issue the white paper and restrict immigration to Palestine. So all around the world, people were starting to get very sensitive to Jewish immigration and starting to stop it. Yes?
Were diamonds discovered there, or was that in other parts of Africa? Because diamonds was a big deal, too.
Jews were involved in the diamond industry, but not to the extent that they were involved in other industries. But yes, they definitely were making inroads into the diamond industry. In 1936, the census said there were 17,684 Yiddish speakers. So in 1937, Eve, World War II, South Africa passed the Aliens Act. And the Aliens Act was designed to severely curtail Jewish immigration, because there had been a large increase at that time of German Jews. So remember, 1937, Kristallnacht is when? '38, right? So there were a number of German Jews who were getting the idea, this is not good for us. We got to get out of here. Obviously, Kristallnacht closed the door on everything, and Jews were trapped after that. But there were enough Jews who had sensed that something was coming, that they immigrated to South Africa. And so South Africa institutes the Aliens Act. Between 1933 and 1939, only 6,500 Jews from Germany were allowed in. And you can imagine how many were trying to get out. After the war, many South African Jews left for Israel. And we know this happened in many, many countries, right? Once the state of Israel is established, then Jews said, okay, we're going there because we're safe there. The figures that I saw said there are approximately 20,000 South African Jews in Israel today. So then we come to the apartheid era, 1948 to approximately 1990. And interestingly enough, there was no anti-Jewish policy. Why? Because Jews were considered whites, right? So we were considered the majority, not the majority, we were considered the good class, the dominant group, exactly. And because at that time, when the State of Israel was first established, they opened channels of communication and cooperation with South Africa. That's good, but wait till you hear this, because when I was researching and I found this out, this was very troubling to me. There was the South African Zionist Federation, and they were reported to be the most financially supportive Zionists abroad. So South African Jews were giving the most money to the State of Israel than any other community of Jews in the world. Israel sent arms to South Africa to help suppress the riots against black people. And I read that and I thought, oh, God, really? Because you would think Jews would be very supportive of racism, supportive of efforts to combat racism and people who were in prison, people who were marginalized. But there was a cooperation agreement between the South African government and the Israeli government, and they sent arms to suppress the riots. On the good side, Jews participated in anti-apartheid protests in a disproportionately high number, especially from the universities. The students, they were marching through the streets. In Cape Town, they had the Jews for Justice, This was an organization, and in Johannesburg, the Jews for Social Justice. This was established in 1985. So these were large protest organizations against apartheid. What was a little side note, what was interesting, when I sent my brothers some of the pictures from Robben Island and Mandela, the middle brother wrote back to me, he goes, that's the only protest I've ever engaged in. I was protesting, I went into the streets and I protested that Mandela was imprisoned. Berkeley.
He was in Berkeley protesting.
He was in Berkeley protesting,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
As a matter of curiosity, across the world, at least the parts I'm familiar with, you will find that Jews have been prominent in movements against tyrannical governments. I say that because that's what happened in Cuba and other places that I know. So in terms of upholding freedom or liberty, Jews have been there.
Yes, we were once slaves in the land of Egypt. So our people understand it under very, which is why when Israel supplied arms, that really bothered me. Yes.
It really shouldn't surprise you because the Jews were, it really shouldn't surprise you because the Jews were very affluent, rich, and involved in the government, and they wanted to maintain the status quo. I mean, that's what happens to people on the top.
Yeah. Yep, probably, you're right. But Jews in Cape Town had a sort of a history of political moderation. The Jewish population peaked in 1970 in South Africa. There were 120,000 Jews. 120,000. Today, there are about 52,000. Some are Orthodox, some are secular, some converted to Christianity. And it is definitely the largest community of Jews on the continent of Africa, are located in South Africa. Mostly in Orthodox and smaller progressive communities. In Johannesburg, there are 40,000 Jews, so by far the largest number of Jews live in, if there are 52,000, 40,000 in Johannesburg, 12,000 in Cape Town. Most of the synagogues in Johannesburg, there is one Hasidic, 2 progressives, and 3 Orthodox, Chabad. They have kosher restaurants, they have religious centers. It's a pretty vibrant Jewish community in Johannesburg. Interestingly, on our tour, we went through Muizenberg on the coast, and I looked over to the left, and there was the Muizenberg Shul right there. In Cape Town, there's 5 modern Orthodox synagogues. Muizenberg is one of them. And there was 1 progressive synagogue. Progressive is something like conservative reform, something in there. Non-Orthodox. And so let me finish up with this because this is really interesting. So South Africa has a large population of the Lemba tribe. L-E-M-B-A, the Lemba tribe. Does anybody know why they are significant?
Okay, I read a book about Jewish DNA, and the Lemhi have claimed that they were Jews. That I don't know the origin and how they got there, and they are black. And so when DNA came into being tested, not only do they have Jewish blood, but they're Kohanim.
So this is correct.
I read an interesting story. Some Jewish journalist or anyhow was visiting, the country where the black Jews, the Lemba tribe, is, and they were surprised, or some of the members of the congregation, they were surprised to find a white Jew, because they did not know that there were actually white Jews in the world.
Wow, wow. So the Lemba trace their lineage back to Solomon, Solomon's temple, and the priests who worked at Solomon's temple. They practice Jewish dietary laws. They don't mix milk and meat, which is kind of interesting to me. They don't mix milk and meat, but mixing milk and meat didn't come about until later on. That didn't come about in Solomon's time. That came about way after, during the rabbis. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but and they don't eat the forbidden foods of the Torah. And as Lana correctly pointed out, they have a paternal, it's called a paternal Y haplotype, a Kohen modal haplotype. Approximately 70% of the Lemba tribe carry this haplotype. And it links them to the Kohanim, to the ancient Kohanim, which means that Aaron's descendants were part of their lineage. Because you know, in our tradition, how you find out if you're a Kohen or a Levi or Israel, your dad tells you or your mom tells you, right? And it turns out, you know, sometimes you're not what they tell you are, but often you are, and that's especially guarded by the Kohanim. If you're a Kohen, that's a thing. It's a thing. Yeah, it's a prestigious thing, and your parents will let you know you're a Kohen. And also sometimes you'll have a name like Cohen, which is going to give it away most of the time. It's not 1,000%, but it's often.
I just have two questions. Are they related to the Ethiopians in a way? Because, you know, they claim that, you know, they derive from, you know, early, you know, time. That's one thing. And do they have a story or a myth of their origin?
So the Ethiopians trace their lineage back to the Queen of Sheba and that incident. So they're not related. No, their origin story is that when the Jews were dispersed after the temples were destroyed, they were part of the lost tribes. Yes. And so in our tradition, you get your lineage, you know, your parents tell you. Sometimes it's not true, often it is. And the deal is that, a while back, they tested a number of Kohanim, and they found people who claimed to be Kohanim. And they found that in a vast majority of cases, these individuals had a specific haplotype in their blood. There was a marker, the Kohen gene. There was a marker, and they all shared it. So they could identify who could trace their lineage back to Aaron. And the Lemda, 70% of them carry that haplotype. Wow. Very interesting. Good. How do they get classified then as whites? No, they're classified as blacks, and Israel does not recognize them. Why? Because it traces paternally. Right? If you recall, how is your Jewishness passed on in the Bible? From your father. From your father. Of course. How does Aaron's sons? It's always Moses' son.
Jewishly, I thought you said.
Yeah. Your tribal affiliation and your tribal affiliation and but also your Jewishness. It's no. Through your father until Roman times. Through your father. All throughout the Torah, it's through your dad. Your dad is the important person. Your mom is not in the Torah. I'll repeat this. Relax.
During the high holidays, my father was called up to say certain prayers.
During the high holidays, my father was called up to say certain prayers.
Yes, and he was not a Kohen. What other, why was...
I would need to know, he was not a Kohen, so I would need to know when he was called up, what part of the service, what prayers was he saying? Yeah, I would need to know. But in my synagogue, for many years, we duchened. I called the Kohanim up, and I led them through the prayers, and they would bless the people, until I didn't have any Kohanim anymore in the congregation. At any rate, so your tribal affiliation and your status as a Jew was conferred upon you by your father, not your mother, until Roman times. And then during Roman times, there were so many conquests and rapes and pillages and plunders that you didn't always know who your father was, but you always know who your mom is. So Judaism changed it, and it became maternally linked, matrilineal, rather than patrilineal. But it was patrilineal all through Torah.
So you're saying that even before all of the movement of Jews coming in during the times that you've been talking about in this lecture, there was a tribe called Lemba who were already practicing Jews, and it was known throughout South Africa that there was a tribe of Jews in South Africa?
That there was a tribe of black people who claimed to be Jews, who claimed to have Jewish heritage. And they weren't accepted, but then they were investigated, and they found out that, wow, there's something here. But it was a paternal link, not a maternal link, which is how Jews are conferred their Judaism today.
Which means?
As you well know, in some Reform congregations, but certainly not all, they will recognize Jewish by patrilineal descent. If your father is Jewish, you can be considered Jewish. But not in conservative and certainly not in Orthodox. That is not the case. Gloria. Now that we have DNA, and we didn't have DNA, now we know that the Father, and I think that we should change that. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Well, you say now that we have DNA and we can prove it. Of course, we can know. But look, folks. But this works in other places in our religion too, right? How did chicken get classified as meat? Chickens aren't mentioned anywhere, right? So how did chicken get in the meat category? Yes, it is a fence around the Torah, and that's because in earlier times, when people had meat to offer you, raw chicken looks a lot like raw veal, right? Now, lest somebody sell you one and you're thinking it's the other, if I can eat chicken with anything and somebody mistakes and sells me veal by accident, then I have violated the laws of kashrut, right? So the Jewish authorities came in and said, no, we got to make chicken meat because then we'll never have a problem. People will understand. And so nowadays, when we can package meat perfectly, right? We know what chicken is, we know what veal is. You could make the argument, well, why don't we just not do that anymore and we could have chicken with everything? Well, it's because it's been this way for a long time and we're not changing it. Well, no one else does. So you just decide to be Ethiopian. Okay, great. All right, I have to go because you have another class. So have a wonderful week, everybody, and I will look forward to seeing you next week.
And congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Is ostrich kosher?
Yeah,
Is ostrich kosher?
Why not?
yeah. Is if it's domesticated. The thing you can't go killing
A wild.
a wild animal, but it's still poultry. See why not?
What's the answer? What you just said.
Hi, how are you doing? Nice to see you. Haven't seen your reactions. Are you okay?
Just a lot of interesting. A lot of interesting things going on in my life, but I'm fine. Well, I was out of my house for 3.5 months because I had a water leak and mold. And I just finally repiped and whatever.
Oh my
so,
God.
And then there's a bunch of other things. I'm $2.25 million later.
It's only money.
No, my daughter moved to a condo. I redecorate.
Yeah.
Get her, my stuff, loans, all kinds of things.
Well, I hope you're okay.
I'm fine. Compared to a lot of other people right now, this
true.
looks like nothing.
I think so, Rabbi. Good enough. Susie, how you feeling? You look good.
I believe it. I believe it. Hello, everybody. I would like to have your attention. Okay, thank you for looking in this direction. We're having a challah bake on the 13th. Hello. Okay. Sisterhood. I'm president of Sisterhood. Thank you. We're having quite a few events, this coming year, and one of them is tonight, which is a Rosh Chodesh. We had one in December. We're having one tonight, and thank you to those of you who have registered already. But on the 30th, thank you. On the 13th of this month, we're having a challah bake, and a few people have signed up, and I know that most people like to wait till the last minute, but I'm just putting a pitch in for this because we need to know how many people are coming to this. It's $36. We've been trying to keep the price down or the cost down, and we have a gift for you. We have a cutting board that we're giving you in addition to, of course, whatever training you have. So I know some of you bake challah and are probably expert at doing it. But if you want to learn how to, braid it differently, please come. It's a Thursday night, and it's the night before Shabbat. Well, Valentine's Day, too. But, if you want to have a challah and bake it for Friday night, Shabbat dinner, please sign up. I think I'll have Susie send it to all the MID members. And thank you for your attention. And, okay, Rabbi, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to take your time, Rabbi.
Is it always this way?
Santiago come.
The room up so that it looks nice for you guys. Okay, actually this is here, so.
Okay, you have one?
Yeah, we'll leave this one over here just in case.
Yeah, because people ask questions.
Okay. That's right, Ernie's my, get these guys all right. Kibitzing crowd. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I am, that's right, the microphone. I don't talk about it. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. I am not Rabbi Alexander. So Rabbi Alexander just got back from Israel, and she had a beautiful trip. And I spoke to her yesterday, and when we were kibitzing, I said, you know what? Stay in bed, get a little relaxed. I'll teach the class tomorrow. So we are starting this class. And then I was given my assignment by Rosalie and Susie, who are the two most organized people in all of Adat Ariel, and they sent me, They're great. And they sent me, I didn't realize I've been assigned my class dates, but we had so I'm beginning second semester, but did Deborah talk to you about the 2 conflicts already? Okay. So if you want to ditch MID one day, what day are we going, am I going to the Reagan? 22nd? I don't know. Hold on. 22nd? Oh, so I am, oh wait, no. I am doing, this is a shameless plug. Yeah. I am leading our High Neighbors group to the Reagan Museum on Wednesday, February 26th. There's a special Dead Sea Scroll exhibit. So that's on the 26th. So if you want to play hooky from MID with me that night, you can sign up. You have to be, I think you have to be a member of MID. I'm not really sure. But I think it's like $36, so just come. And that's on the 26th. And then also on Saturday the 22nd here at Adat.Ariel, I'll be leading a lecture about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So even if you can't come with Adat.Ariel to the Reagan, but you're interested in knowing more about the Dead Sea Scrolls, or maybe you want to go to the Dead Sea Scroll exhibit yourself, I'm leading a talk again after Kiddush on Saturday, February 22nd. Okay? So it's February 22nd, Saturday, and then we're going to the actual exhibit on the 26th. And then I also want to let everyone know, this is another shameless publicity. You know what? Maybe we can do this. Maybe we'll just, it's okay. Well, maybe we'll keep it to after, okay? Yeah, I'm sure it is. Do you? Yeah, in so many ways. Okay, so on, I also want to let everyone know that on Saturday, February 8th, we are hosting Super Bowl Shabbat. It is our 4th Super Bowl Shabbat, and we have a vegetarian chili cook-off as our Kiddush for that Shabbat. And I will tell you, as part of the Devar Torah, who is going to win the big game. Because, Sue, I know you've lost sleep thinking about the Super Bowl and who is going to win the Super Bowl. I know who's going to win the Super Bowl according to the Torah, and that is going to be on February 8th. Okay. Eileen, don't be so sure. Okay. All right. It's a fun day. Okay. What I want to begin is I'm going to give you a roadmap of what we're going to do. I'd like to discuss the dynamics behind the discussion over the hostage deal that's continuing to be implemented. I want to then seemingly take a sharp turn away from that to define a term that is very popular in contemporary Jewish circles. And then I want to show you how in the Talmud, this term that's become popularized figures prominently in the discussion over over making deals for hostages in the Talmud. So again, we're going to talk about the hostage deal. We're going to talk about the dynamics. I wonder if the way you perceive the dynamics of that issue is how the Talmud perceives it. I'm going to then define a term that we have dealt with, that we deal with in contemporary Jewish circles that many of you will be familiar with. And then I want to show you how this term is used perhaps in an unexpected way in the actual Talmud text itself. So that is my agenda. Okay? Great. And we're going to do it all in 45 minutes. Okay, I have to leave at 12 o'clock sharp. So if I cut you short with your comments, know that we got to start on time because I prepare an hour worth of material and I got to leave always on at 12 pretty sharp. So If I cut you off, it's not because I'm rude. It's just I got to go. Or maybe I'm a little rude. I don't know. Okay. So if someone, forget about personal opinions. Okay? This is not what you think. This is how you've seen. How you've seen the argument made. Why was it important? What has been the argument for Israel making, by the way, I think it goes without saying, but we should say it nevertheless. Machzirim hotam habayita akshav, that bring them home now, and God willing, in the coming hours, 3 more Israelis will be returned to their families, Bezrat Hashem, that they should experience freedom in the coming hours. 2 young ladies and 1 elderly gentleman, and it's our hope that they will come home in safety and in health. And then, God willing, all of them will be returned. And actually, it's important for us to talk about hostages, because everyone in Israel today is wearing orange. So, Louise, that you're wearing orange, Lois, that you're wearing orange today is what all of Israel is doing, thinking about the Bibas family, the beautiful family with the redhead children. They're wearing orange because the truth of the matter is the signs don't look good. That if they had, there's no confirmation that they are deceased, but there's no signs of life yet, and you would think that they would have been released. It's complicated, but so all of Israel is wearing orange and hoping and praying. Although, like, as I told my kids, when you pray for this one, it's only, we know at least eight are deceased. So when you say, oh, I want that, it's like choosing one or the other. It's very complicated and it's horrible. The whole thing is horrible. And the whole idea, thank you, Eileen, for saying that the whole thing is horrible because there's really no good answer here. And then I want to show you this discussion in the Talmud about how the Talmud really captures kind of how horrible this all is and sort of the dynamics of that. So in Israel, just raise your hand, and I'll say it very succinctly. I'll repeat it for the millions who are watching online. What is the reason for making a hostage deal? Someone in Israel, what's the reason that people support the hostages? The deal. Make a deal with Hamas, a terrorist organization, to bring home the hostages. Why? What have you read? Good. The Torah actually, and the Shulchan Aruch and many other places say not only is it a mitzvah, and I don't mean good deed, I mean mitzvah, commandment. It's not only a commandment, but it's perhaps no greater commandment in all of the corpus of Judaism than Pidyon Shvuin, redeeming the captives. So we are a people who believe in the value. If you believe that one soul has infinite worth, how can you leave captives behind? How can you, and throughout our history as a people, we've always engaged in the idea of Pidyon Shvuin, redeeming the captive. Okay? There's also an idea any other thoughts? What in Israel is animating this discussion? So, yes, it's a mitzvah. Why else? Don't worry, you don't have to be like Thomas Friedman to figure this out. This is not, why else? Why else are they talking about it? Go ahead, Bridget.
They don't want to give Hamas the power or the points for keeping the hostage.
Good. So they don't want, and also they don't want Hamas to gain like a win, right? And also, could you imagine condemning these, walking away and knowing what these people are going through? Sentencing one of our own to that? What a horrible way to die. Many of you remember there was that the little girl who was taken captive. She was released, after 50 so days in the first hostage deal. And the father, who was, I think he was Scottish, and he said, I wish that she, when he first thought she had died, and he said, I that would have been the merciful way, because it turned out that she came back alive. But hasn't that thought crossed all of our minds that, my gosh, like, what could have happened to these people? What did happen to these people over 400, almost 460 days and what is happening to them in captivity by these barbarians who have no regard, or they have a disdain for Jewish life? Okay. What's the argument? And then there's a social contract. The job of a government is to protect its citizens. Perhaps there's no other job that a government has than to keep its people safe. And so those people who are living on the border of Gaza, by the way, like the left of Israel's left, not Likudniks at all, like people who would go and fly kites to over the boundary with Gaza to say, hey, we have a possibility of like one day, God willing, we'll live in peace. I mean, these were people who were peace loving, and they thought they were safe. Oh, we're a startup nation. We have all the technology and the scanners and the drones and the this and the that, and the government. You could settle there. You could build kibbutz. Kfar Aza and Nir Oz and all these other kibbutzim and settlements. You could build them there, no problem. We're Israel. We'll keep you safe. Didn't happen. And so does the government have a responsibility then, when it failed in its most sacred obligation, to redeem its captives? And not only that, they're not only civilians, but the reason that most Israelis come to terms with their children being conscripted into the army, for those who serve. That's another discussion for another day. Most of them do, but there's a part of the population that doesn't. The average Israeli says, I understand the need to give my child, and their kids, the older I get, the younger they look. I can imagine for all of you. These are your grandchildren. I mean, make your grandchildren look young. I mean, old. So I look at them and I see my kids. And the only way, when you're 18, 19, you kind of these kids are signing up and they're gung-ho, and I've seen it. I've been to the ceremonies, service, but as a parent, I bet you, the kids, they go with enthusiasm. I bet you that the parents don't sleep for the moment that the child puts on the uniform till the last moment the child takes off the uniform. And the only way that social contract works is if the Israeli people, believe that the government, at push comes to shove, supports their soldiers. So how can you have these girls who are surveillance soldiers that are just watching computer monitors before these Hamas butchers storm in, like a bunch of and they come in like the government has of course you have to, if you want people to serve, you have to stand by your soldiers. You have to stand by your citizens. Okay. What's the argument in Israel? And again, we're not evaluating, because there's arguments against the hostage deal. What's an argument that you think could be made against a hostage deal? If you are one of the parents, of course there's no argument. Of course there's no argument. But that's why the parents aren't making the decisions. Of course, no one, by the way, and I am more centrist, but nobody, even when you hear these more right, like right of right, nobody has anything but compassion for the parents and for the families and for the hostages. But there is a case to be made against a hostage deal that is logical, that you could easily make. And what would that case be? Lois?
Well, the thought that came to my mind is, when you're making a deal, you have to make concessions to the other side. And don't really want to do in order to close the deal that you want.
Right. And when does the price become too high? Bridget and then Zissel.
Well, you're releasing prisoners as part of the deal that may just go and reconstitute Hamas or be by themselves and commit more terrorism.
Right. Look at what happened. Yahya Sinwar, he was released in the Gilad Shalit deal, a dozen years ago. The very architect of October 7th was a concession and so you're left sitting there and you're thinking, is this too high of a price to pay? Also, and I don't mean to speak in economic terms, but when they made the deal for Gilad Shalit, you remember the Gilad Shalit situation, right? He was in captivity for 5 years. He was a Israeli hostage. This is when we learned about the tunnels. They popped out, they grabbed this kid, and they took him into captivity. And he sat there, and when they made the deal, it was one Israeli soldier returned for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. And when they returned him, economics now, you just set a market. If you're talking about supply and demand. And what was the message you just told Hamas when you send one soldier for 1,000 prisoners? Right. This is a valuable commodity. And so there is no coincidence that when they stormed in on October 7th, they were looking to take hostages because at the price point that had been established, they realized the no greater mitzvah than Pidyon Shvuin, redeeming the captives. They knew that this was Israel's Achilles heel. Our reverence for life was our Achilles heel. And so they use that against us. And is there a price, therefore, that becomes, are you therefore encouraging future captivity by making a deal, even though the price is incredibly painful, but are you in effect saving lives by not making a deal because then you show the captors? I'm not advocating for that position. I'm simply saying that that's a position and it does make sense. Yes, go ahead.
But also, I know that Sinwar had a brain tumor. He was in prison, and an Israeli doctor operated on him and saved his life.
That's right. Sinwar, and there was a New York Times article about, and you want to hear the terrible irony about this doctor who saved Sinwar's life. I think it was a dentist who discovered that he had a cancer or something like that, and then they operated on him and saved Sinwar's life. And this doctor who gets the credit, his nephew was killed on October 7th. Okay. Right. If you make a deal, does Hamas win? Yes. Right. And so there is this very difficult, I think everyone in Israel acknowledges this is a complicated calculus. This is not a no-brainer. When to make a deal, if you make a deal, when's it a bad deal? And if you make the deal, oy, and if you don't make the deal, oy, there's no winning. There's no winning. It's a catch-22. This is an unwinnable situation. Now, I want to pause here. Sorry, Zissel. I'm going to pause here, and I want to remember some of the dynamics of this discussion, because we're going to see them play out in the Talmud in just a minute. I want to talk about a term that you wouldn't expect to be associated with this discussion. And so let's say that I call you up, I say, do you want to be on the Tikkun Olam committee at the synagogue? We have a Tikkun Olam committee. Do you want to be on the Tikkun Olam committee? And what does the Tikkun Olam committee do? Repair the world, right? Repair the world. So what kind of projects do you think the Tikkun Olam committee would do at any synagogue? Repair. What? There's countless problems, right? So usually, or here, and this is where we're going to start. This is Mayor Michael Bloomberg when he was serving as the mayor of New York City. Yeah. Yeah, sure. We'll just pass these over here.
Do we have enough?
Yeah, he's the mayor, and he introduces a term in his speech. I don't remember what he was talking about, but it's a quote from the New York Times. Okay. Those of you who are taking one, you are all doing tikkun olam, because you're preventing the wasting of paper. Trees, tikkun olam. So oh, it's in. Okay. It's an amber alert. So we say, El Narafana La, may God wish, bring healing to all those who are in danger. Okay. So here's what Mayor Michael Bloomberg, he's the mayor of New York, and he's giving a press conference, and he says this: in my faith, the Jewish faith, there is a religious obligation called tikkun olam, or to make the world whole, or to correct error and end injustice. And that responsibility is found among the people of goodwill in every faith. This is a press conference. He's the mayor of New York, and he's tikkun olaming. And I got to tell you, whenever I meet politicians, the non-Jewish politicians, they always try shalom, and then often they'll say, oh, the ones who get like second layer, they'll throw out tikkun olam. They'll say, oh, tikkun olam. They love, like, that's, you're working on this initiative because you're Jewish, tikkun olam. And, like I used to do a lot of work in food advocacy, before the organization I worked with declared their support for the eradication of the state of Israel, then I decided I would find a new organization. But I used to do this advocacy work for food, and this is the rabbi tikkun olam, great. Tikkun olam, we kind of think about it as like these sweeping, broad, like mythic, change the world, kumbaya, make everything better, tikkun olam. Great. Let's see how tikkun olam figures in the Talmud and how it relates to this discussion, because you'll see it in a very unexpected way, in a very different light, and you'll see this phrase or this term introduced in the Talmud's discussion, which is a complicated one, about the return of captives. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna read it through once, and then I'm gonna break it down. So who's gonna read from me? You know what? I'm just gonna read it today.
Choose yourself.
That's right. Exactly. I choose myself. Okay. This is a piece from Masechet Gittin, which starts at least and is anchored by the subject of Jewish divorce. And as you know, a get is a Jewish bill of divorce, so Gittin, like the whole get enterprise. The Mishnah states, I'm in that second box on that first page, the captives, so it seems to be that there's a problem, because everyone realizes that the Jews revere life. And as such, it's a mitzvah, and no greater mitzvah than to redeem life. Well, now also I want to say that in the Talmud, which is probably this The Mishnah, which is one part of the Talmud, is written around the year 200, and the Gemara, which is another part of the Talmud, maybe like 500-600. They didn't anticipate people being captive, like ideologically, like ideological captives. They didn't picture like an organization like Hamas. But what they were experiencing, especially if you think about the Jews, the Mishnah and both the Gemara, so the Talmud is dealing with a post-sovereign Jewish political entity that has no political power in the Roman Empire, and it certainly has no political power, and certainly has no military power. So we're powerless, a powerless people in the world, and very common in those days, still common, unfortunately, brigands. A brigand is like a raider, someone like a pirate, someone who would come, and that's how they made money. They'd see Zissel walking along, they'd snatch up Zissel, they'd send a note to his family. I got Zissel. You want Zissel back? $1 million. So kidnapping for a price. So that was very common. Mostly, as the rabbis are responding to, the impetus behind which is different than the contemporary Hamas. I want to acknowledge that. But the brigands of antiquity, these raiders of antiquity, are economically motivated, which is not what Hamas is motivated by. Hamas is motivated by hate of the Jewish people. All right. So the Mishnah states, the captives are not redeemed for more than their monetary value for the betterment of the world, meaning tikkun olam. Get this. Captives are not redeemed for more than their monetary value for the tikkun olam. And one may not aid the captives in their attempt to escape from their captors because of the betterment of the world, tikkun olam. So that kidnappers will not be more restrictive with their captives to prevent them from escaping. We'll get to that later. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, for the betterment of the captives, so that kidnappers will not avenge the escape of the captives by treating other captives with cruelty. Okay, we'll stop there for a second. Any reactions to the Mishnah? What way is the Mishnah surprising? Does the Mishnah surprise you? Zissel?
There are two sides to this story. One is be kind to the captors so that the captives will not suffer. However, that is a one way. It doesn't work with all captors. It does not. On the other hand, if you instill fear in the captors, it may be more productive for you.
Okay, so Zissel's arguing with the Mishnah. Zissel says, it says here that you don't encourage, you don't aid in the escape. And Zissel says that means you kind of like back away from the captor. And Zissel saying, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe you should actually really give it to the captors. Okay. Other reactions to the Mishnah. I'm specifically inquiring about the use of the term tikkun olam. How does the Mishnah use the term betterment of the world or tikkun olam here? And how is that surprising or somewhat ironic considering our earlier definition of the term? Go ahead, Bridget.
Well, that's the theme in a lot of stories in TV that, you know, the person who was his daughter, they're saying, I'm going to do anything and I'm going to go get him and whatever. And then the police say, no, you can't do that because, it'll affect the future.
Right, good. So Bridget says, tikkun olam, which we think about like environmental cleanup and going to the beach and recycling initiatives and preventing global warming and race relations and reaching out. And that's all tikkun olam, tikkun olam, tikkun olam. Those are all great things. They're big and they're sweeping. And this is saying no. Tikkun olam, it's not saying no. It's saying, in this case, tikkun olam is when you are doing that very important mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuin, redeeming the captives, meaning ransom, you only pay market value for a person. Now, that's a whole discussion. What is market value, right? Well, we all kind of know, like here, like if someone said, the person, $10 million, $10 billion, that's not market, right? So we kind of like have an idea of, and I like to think of it when people ask this about from another class. Actually, Melinda was asking about it. She was in the other class. It's sort of like, think about like if there was an accidental death lawsuit and how much a family would be compensated for an accidental death of somebody. Like, what's the monetary value of someone? So it's saying, now it's not saying it's saying that should be your compass. So if someone, Zissel, do you mind that you were the snatched one before? Like, are you okay being the captive in the story here? Are you okay? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So here, I'll be the captive. Okay. So I don't want to, So someone snags me, and they call up my wife, and they say, they say, she's like, yeah, keep him. He doesn't do laundry anyway. They say, I'd like to think she'd say, I'll pay anything. But the Mishnah is saying, no. She says, I want to uphold this very important mitzvah, but I don't want to be taken advantage of. Because if I'm taken advantage of, it's interesting. It's not saying you don't negotiate with the terrorists. That used to be like the American creed. It was Israel's creed too, but no one believed them because they'd be don't negotiate with the terrorists while they were negotiating with the terrorists, right? It doesn't say here, don't negotiate. Because of Tikkun Olam, don't negotiate with the terrorists. It's not saying that. It's saying negotiate, but you have a monetary guideline because we don't want to create, obviously the Mishnah is not saying this, but we don't want to create more Gilad Shalit deals. Right. Okay. Then the Mishnah says something else and says we can't aid captives from escaping because of Tikkun Olam. That's one opinion. And the other opinion, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, we don't aid in captives escaping for the betterment of the captives. And we'll discuss the difference between those two opinions. So everyone agrees you can't help them escape. One opinion is you can't help them escape because it's of Tikkun Olam, betterment of the world. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says no, for the betterment of the captives. We'll talk about how those two opinions differ in just a second. That's what the Gemara is going to go there in a second. You're onto it, Rosalie. Good. Okay. So now we're in the Gemara. You see where we are? Everyone see where it says we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down in the second box, the second word where it says Gemara. A dilemma was raised before the sages. By the way, I think I should tell you, the bold-faced is the literal translation of the Talmud, and the regular typeface is Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz's commentary to kind of explain what's going on. I'm going to not use his commentary all the time because it's not actually in the Talmud. It's how he's reading the text. It's very helpful, but it is also his perspective, okay? And when I teach this class starting in February, when I bring the text, you'll notice that. I'm always use Steinsaltz's commentary, but I don't always, sometimes I cut it out because it gives away a lot too. A dilemma was raised. For the betterment of the world? Is it due to pressure for the community? Or perhaps, I'm down a few lines, It's because that they will not seize and bring additional captives. So when the Mishnah says, don't overpay for a captive, if there's a person who's taken captive, don't overpay because of tikkun olam. The Gemara asks the question, the Mishnah says,
How do you know what overpay is? What is that amount?
because there's, again, it's sort of like, what is if there was like, say, a wrongful, whatever like seems like the market price, meaning like if there was a wrongful death suit, like you would.
How much he would make the rest of his life, you have to pay.
Okay, so right, so there could be a big discussion. That's not the discussion that the Talmud has, but that is a good discussion. What constitutes, and this is Melinda, you were concerned about this, what constitutes a real price? Is it like how good their relationship is with their wife and kids? You know, he's not such a good husband. Half price. Or, you know, he's a real young person and he's a doctor, you know, so like high earning potential. It doesn't really say, the Gemara chooses not to discuss that. But you get the feeling, like I gave that example, like if the kidnapper called and say $10 million, I'd start a crowdsource, like a GoFundMe page or, you know. But if the kidnapper called and said $10 trillion, I'd be like, you know, I can't even, like, give me a break. Like, okay. So, but that's not what the Gemara chooses to focus on. The Gemara, which is uses the Mishnah as a jumping off point. The Mishnah, the Gemara says, what is tikkuno, like, what does this mean? Let's explore this. And the Gemara gives two possibilities of how not overpaying could be tikkun olam. The first possibility is if you the first one is, something we didn't actually, the Gemara has an argument. When the Mishnah says, do not overpay for hostages, because of tikkun olam, the Gemara asks a question, which is, by that, do you mean that, we don't want to overpay because of the betterment of the world, tikkun olam, because we're concerned about the finances of the community? In other words, let's say a .rel, God forbid. You know, it's okay, I can be the person. Like the but someone snags me. And then an email goes out. They got Rabbi Schuldenfrei. Everyone open your wallet. The board will decide. You know, he's okay. He's okay. You know, he's no Schulweiss. So, you know. So they could say, but imagine, imagine like a real community coming together and saying, wait a second, we can't afford that. So if we overpay, the community will go broke. So maybe that's what the Gemara meant the Mishnah meant. Maybe the Mishnah meant we don't overpay to preserve the finances of the community. So when the phone call comes in and says $10 gazillion, we say, sorry, we'll be bankrupt as a community. Then the Talmud introduces another possibility and says, wait, maybe it's not that. But maybe when it says do not overpay for the hostages for the betterment of the world, it means the Gilad Shalit situation. Don't overpay, because if you overpay once, you're going to overpay again and again and again, and it gets worse and sadder. Okay. Now what's interesting is, Eileen, you're doing this. Okay. Well, that's a good question, but most cases, by the way, in the Talmud go unanswered. So, like, the Talmud will pose like different opinions, but doesn't really come to any. Over 90% of Talmudic opinions, arguments go unresolved. So the Gemara will put out possibilities. So let's just take a straw vote. When it says do not overpay for hostages because of tikkun olam, how many find the idea that that is animated by the finances of the community as the reason more compelling? In other words, the community will go broke. How many find it more compelling that the captors will grab more hostages? Okay. How many of you are asleep and not really concerned with what I'm saying at all? Okay. I don't know. It's just a straw poll. Go ahead, Rosalie. Oh, you're going to step up. You're going to... Go ahead. You're bothered by something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am bothered by something. Is there international law that is against kidnapping?
Of course.
And in the World Court, and they do nothing about this. I mean, how many nations?
Because no offense, I mean, this is the only way of learning, Jewish blood is cheap. Right. Jewish blood is cheap. No, Rosalie, you are right to be, not only you are right. Correct. It is a criminal offense. And wouldn't we, right, it's a criminal defense. It seems like, oh, yes, let's have, warrants for every Israeli official out there, and we'll arrest them and we'll condemn them, and the human rights, China's writing human rights violations, give me a break. I mean, it's like, if it wasn't so sad, it's laughable. But the bottom line is the Talmud is not talking to the world. The Talmud is talking to us as a community and asking us how to live our values. Gloria pointed out before, the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuin, of redeeming the captives, is a big mitzvah, very important mitzvah. Redeeming the captives is important. But the Talmud deals with when the rubber hits the road. How do you decide? And what are the animating reasons for making decisions that you make? So the Talmud at first in the Mishnah makes a statement: don't overpay. Don't do it. And then the Gemara introduces, wait a second, do you not overpay for hostages? Because if you overpay for hostages, eventually you'll bankrupt the community. And that's what it means, tikkun olam. Or do you not overpay hostages because of tikkun olam? Meaning, if you overpay for hostages, more hostages and more hostages and more hostages will be taken, and that will be a terrible thing. Okay, so that is what the Gemara says. Go ahead.
Okay, so it seems to me like this use of tikkun olam is a very limited question of what tikkun olam for the Jewish community.
Yes. So it's very interesting, the difference between the biblical construct of tikkun olam. It's not really, the term tikkun olam is not used, but it's used like in the prophetic litakin olam b'malchut shaddai. It's part of the second paragraph of the Aleinu that we all mumble. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol down, when we start mumbling, and everyone's like talking to their friends, it says litakin olam b'malchut shaddai, to like bring like healing according to like the sovereignty of God's kingdom. That's like, wow, that's a global statement. And in fact, that's the tikkun olam that inspired much of the contemporary Jewish landscape now. Just a piece of history, the term tikkun olam was largely reintroduced, but first of all, it's American. Like you go to Israel and you're like, oh, Yishlanu Vad Tikkun Olam. We have a committee called Tikkun Olam. They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like that makes no sense. So I just asked one of our the Israeli music teacher who comes to my Talmud class on Tuesdays. And I'm like, what if you said Tikkun Olam in Israel, what do people think? And they'd say Zemuzar. It's like strange. But it was popularized in America. Think about the 60s. And it was popularized in America by Shlomo Bardin. Michael Lerner really took it also, like Michael Lerner with the Tikkun magazine and his activism, right? So he's very much like that. Before him, Shlomo Bardin, but yes, and they're all, like if you read Michael Lerner's books, his sense of tikkun olam is grand. It's a big change. It's revolution. And when the Talmud talks about tikkun olam, it's molecular, it's atomic, it's small. It's wait a second. There's a big mitzvah. Hold on for a second. There's a big mitzvah. The mitzvah is to redeem hostages. But we have to fix that idea just a little bit. We got to make sure to add this clause in here. It's a little bit of a fix. Tikkun olam, it's a little tikkun. It's not a global revolution, peace. It's, the laws of redeeming the hostages don't really work that well. Because it can be like end up where we're really in a bad place. So we got to tell people don't overpay. We got to add that to the definition. That's a tikkun olam. The rabbinic tikkun olam is like looks at what's going on with the Jewish landscape according to Jewish law and says, wait a second, the situation is not perfect. And therefore, I'll give you another example of this. And then I got to go. Here's another example. In the Torah, it tells us that all debts are remitted in the 7th year. And it's a beautiful idea. It's called Shemitah, right? And the whole idea, you lay your lands fallow and then all debts are canceled, right? It's a great idea. It's like an economic reset. That sounds good. But Ken over there then comes to me, and it happens every 7th year. So Ken comes to me in the 6th year, and he says, Brian, I got to borrow some money from you. What am I going to tell Ken over there? Only for 1 year. I'm going to tell him, right, repay it, right, make sure it's all repaid. Ernie's a good businessman. Ken, you got to repay it within the first year. And Ken's like, I can't afford that. I said, no loan, because I can't afford, Ken, for my loan to you to be canceled, then I'm left holding the bag. So what inadvertently happened was the loan markets dried up. But the spirit behind the law was beautiful. The spirit behind the law was to facilitate people not becoming like indebted, perpetual debtors, and to pass that debt on from generation to generation. So every 7 years, we'll have an economic reset button. That's a beautiful idea. But wait a second, if I'm the one who's giving the loan, I'm not going to be giving a loan. And then all of a sudden, Ken, he needs the money. I want to loan the money. So no one's happy with the new situation. So what the rabbis did is, a tikkun olam. A little bit of a fix. So what they say is, this is what we'll do. I am not allowed to hold a loan in the 7th year because I'm a person, but we'll create, it's kind of like an early corporation. Everyone will put all of their loans in one place, and that'll be the holding place for the loans. So in the 7th year, Ken doesn't repay me, he repays an entity. And therefore, I can still give Ken the loan. And then back in the 1st year, we're back in business. So Ken then can get his loan. So they realize the rabbi, Baruch Hashem, you can get a loan. He's paying for lunch, everyone. He's back in business. So what you see in rabbinic tikkun olam is a much different kind of tikkun olam than the tikkun olam of contemporary Judaism. It's concerned with a very small issue. And the small issue, and we didn't do all the text of the rabbis, was we have, just like Gloria said, we have an enormous mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of assuring that these people don't spend the rest of their lives in captivity. And we have to make a little bit of an abridgment to that. Don't overpay. By the way, most people will say the Gemara ends up landing on this. Don't overpay because you're going to get more hostages. Okay, I've got to run.
Those two choices are not enough for the mother of the hostage.
For the mother of the hostage, of course not. Of course not. There is no answer for any mother of any hostage. And by the way, most of Israeli society, right, left, center, supported the hostage deal. There was a vocal minority that had a point. Not saying I agree with that point. I'm just saying that when they said, they were saying that it's a pained situation. Like we said before, there is no winning. But that's why they needed to make a tikkun to the laws to engage in negotiations with Hamas and say, no, Hamas, it's not whatever you want. Because if I say Hamas, it's whatever you want, I've pretty much made certain that there's going to be another one. Oy vey. God willing, machzirim otam habayita akshav, that our hostages will come home, God willing, and I want to wish you all a wonderful day, and thank you for being here. I got to run. It seems like there's a spill here, so don't step over here.
Yeah, I'll get a mop for that.
You'll not get a mop. The maintenance people will get a
I'll
mop.
have it cleaned up. Anyway, I want to say it's a numbers game. The more prisoners we get, then we can negotiate more in terms of the hostage deal. Do you follow me? The more prisoners and
The more prisoners we get.
More Palestinian prisoners.
Right, but then there's a problem with that, Rosalie.
No space.
You can no space, but you can only arrest people who do things wrong because we're not them.
Well, yeah. How do you negotiate with Hamas? I mean,
You're right.
thank you, Rabbi.
But what are we going to do? Tell a mom, sorry, we're not negotiating with them? It's a terrible situation. Terrible.